The void of space had always been a place of silence, where even the most advanced civilizations could vanish into the darkness without a trace. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had ruled the stars, its vast war fleets a testament to its unchallenged dominance. No one had dared threaten its power. No one, except humanity. At the edge of the Empire's outermost territory, on the edge of the nebular expanse, the first sign of something unusual appeared on the sensors. It was faint at first, a blip, a signal that made the officers in the command room exchange puzzled glances. They could not identify the source. The frequency was unlike anything the Empire's vast intelligence networks had cataloged. Curious, they directed a deeper scan, and that's when the first officer's hands trembled as the data flowed in. "Admiral Varkin," the officer called, his voice strained with disbelief. "You need to see this." The mighty admiral of the Galactic Empire, a man who had crushed rebellions and extinguished civilizations with a mere gesture, turned slowly from his console. The officer's voice wavered, his composure shaking. "It's a fleet, but it doesn't belong to anyone in the known galaxy. The ships, they're human." Varkin's cold eyes narrowed. "Humans?" He grunted in disbelief, as if the word itself was an insult. The humans had been written off centuries ago, their primitive technology far too backward to even consider a threat. The Empire's intelligence had tracked Earth for millennia, watching as the humans scratched and clawed their way through their own wars and petty disputes, never reaching the stars, never even leaving their solar system. "Impossible," Varkin muttered, stepping forward. He stared at the fleet's data, their movements, strategic, deliberate, and swift. This was no fluke. This was real. "Bring up the visual feed," he ordered. On the screen, the fleet slowly came into focus. Massive ships, gleaming with unfamiliar materials, their edges sharp, their silhouettes sleek and imposing. There were no markings, no emblems of allegiance or origin, but there was something in their design, something sharp, like the edge of a blade. These ships weren't just constructed, they were crafted for war. Where did they come from? Varkin's voice was quiet, more to himself than anyone else in the room. His mind raced with questions, none of them answered. It had to be a mistake. Earth was a forgotten relic, nothing more than a dot in the galaxy's rearview mirror. The fleet, humans, had arrived in force, and yet they did not make their move immediately. They lingered at the outermost edge of Imperial space, waiting. As the fleet expanded on the screen, it became clear that the Empire was dealing with something unprecedented. A quiet dread began to crawl into Varkin's chest. He turned to his senior officer, his voice low but firm. "Initiate communications," Varkin commanded. "Let's hear what they have to say." A tense silence filled the command room. The comm officer hesitated before pressing a series of buttons to establish the connection. Moments passed, each one stretching out in agonizing anticipation. Finally, the crackling sound of the transmission broke through the air, followed by a deep, calm voice. "This is Admiral Kane of the human fleet," the voice said, its tone cold, unwavering. "Your reign ends today. Your empire is over." Varkin froze. The words hit him like a shockwave, each syllable a heavy blow against the Empire's invincible facade. His mind struggled to comprehend the enormity of what he was hearing. These were humans, primitive, insignificant humans, speaking as if they had the power to end an empire. A low murmur rippled through the officers in the room, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. One voice broke through the murmur. "How could they know who we are?" Another officer asked. "How did they even get here?" Varkin stood rigid, his face pale beneath the dark tattoos of his military rank. His empire, invincible and unchallenged for millennia, was now under threat from a race they had written off long ago. "Prepare for battle," Varkin said, his voice now hard with the weight of command. "But remember this, the Empire does not fear humans." He turned to face the vast fleet, already preparing itself for a fight they had no way of understanding. The human ships loomed on the edges of the galaxy, shadows growing darker, and the galaxy trembled at the thought of what was coming. A single thought pierced through the Admiral's mind like a cold blade. Humanity remembers. The Empire was swift to respond, but no one in the command room, not even Admiral Varkin himself, truly understood what they were up against. Within moments of the human transmission, the fleet was already shifting into formation, preparing for battle. Varkin's face remained unreadable, though his mind churned with disbelief. He had witnessed countless battles, faced enemy fleets far larger than this one. Yet he felt an odd sensation, something like a primal instinct deep within him, telling him this was different. He could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. Orders were barked out quickly, and the Imperial warships surged forward in tight formation, their massive hulls cutting through space like sharks in the dark ocean. Imperial battle cruisers, each armed with energy cannons capable of obliterating planets, led the charge. Varkin stood at the center of the command room, watching the feed as the ships of humanity's fleet advanced with cold precision. Their design was unlike anything seen before, sleek, angular, almost organic in their form, as if each ship were crafted with purpose and intent. There was no hesitation in their movements, no sign of uncertainty. They were here for one thing, and one thing only: battle. The first engagement occurred within moments, far sooner than the Empire had expected. The distance between the two fleets shrank with terrifying speed. Varkin watched as the Empire's weapon systems came online, as energy shields flared to life around the massive warships. But then the humans fired. At first, it seemed like a single coordinated blast from one of their ships, just a streak of light in the darkness. It struck one of the Empire's battle cruisers, a ship known for its impenetrable shields. But instead of the expected flare of a shield absorbing the blow, there was nothing. No resistance, no deflection. The cruiser's shields flickered briefly before they collapsed entirely, and the ship was torn apart in an instant, as if it were paper caught in the jaws of a ravenous beast. Varkin's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The Empire's technology was unrivaled. No one had ever breached their shields, not even the mightiest of the galaxy's empires. Yet here they were, facing an enemy whose weapons didn't just break through. They annihilated, eradicated. It wasn't just technology. It was something else, something Varkin couldn't even begin to fathom. "Report." Varkin snapped, his voice a sharp command. "Admiral, their energy weapons. They're tearing through our ships like paper," one of the officers replied, his voice trembling. "Our shields, nothing's holding up. We're losing ships at an alarming rate." Varkin's knuckles whitened on the edge of the command console as he fought to suppress the surge of panic that threatened to claw its way to the surface. The battlefield was chaos, the hum of alarms now filling every corner of the command room. A second Imperial cruiser exploded into a ball of fire, followed by a third, and then a fourth. It was impossible. Each human ship, each one a single unit of the fleet, seemed to have the power of 1,000 warships, their weapons and tactics far beyond the capacity of the Imperial forces to counter. The humans weren't just using superior technology. They were orchestrating the destruction like a deadly symphony, each movement calculated, each strike deadly. There was no hesitation in their attacks, no mercy in their hearts. This wasn't just an invasion. This was a massacre. "We need reinforcements now." Varkin barked, but the words felt hollow in his mouth. Reinforcements. There was no reinforcements. The Empire's greatest fleets were already on the battlefield. The might of the Empire was failing. Aboard the human flagship, Admiral Kane stood with his hands clasped behind his back, observing the destruction with a detached calm. His eyes scanned the live feed of the battle, calculating every moment, every decision. He had been preparing for this his entire life. He had known the Empire's arrogance, had studied their flaws, their weaknesses, and now he was watching them crumble. The transmission crackled again, this time with an urgency that made Varkin's heart race. "Admiral Varkin, The human voice said, "You can't win. Surrender now, and we will spare what's left of your people. Continue to resist, and we will end you." There was no fury in the voice, no anger, just cold certainty. It was as if Cain knew the outcome already. The Empire's fall was inevitable. For a brief, terrifying moment, Varkan considered the possibility of surrender. He had heard of the rumors surrounding humanity, of their resilience, their ability to survive and rise when no one expected them to. But this was different. This was war on a scale he had never seen. And there was something more beneath the surface of this conflict. This wasn't just about defeating the Empire. It was about revenge. "Send a counteroffer," Varkan snapped, his voice laced with frustration. "We'll make them see reason." But his officers, their faces pale with fear, remained silent. There was no reason left to offer. The humans had shown them exactly what they were capable of. The Empire, with all its might, was being torn apart. As the battle raged on, Varkan felt something strange. A knot in his stomach, an unfamiliar weight pressing down on him. They had underestimated humanity. It had been centuries since the Empire had even considered the possibility that Earth could be anything more than a primitive backwater. Now, the truth was clear. Earth was no longer just a planet in the far reaches of the galaxy. It was a force to be reckoned with, and the Galactic Empire was going to pay the price. The hum of the battle echoed in Admiral Varkan's mind, the chaos of the front lines far away, yet impossible to ignore. His flagship had become a fortress of frantic orders and unanswered questions. As the human fleet tore through his forces with ruthless precision, he couldn't escape the crushing weight of disbelief. His empire, the dominant force in the galaxy, was being overwhelmed by humanity. The humans, those once considered weak, insignificant, unworthy of attention, had arrived, and they weren't just fighting. They were punishing. Varkan stood alone in the war room now, staring out at the vastness of space, a vastness that had once represented invincibility. 1,000 thoughts clamored for his attention, but one stood out above all others. How did they become this powerful? The humans had been a forgotten memory to the Empire. Earth had once been marked for conquest, but their technology was laughable. Primitive weapons, a barely functioning space program, and an internal history of war and division. The Empire's intelligence reports had written them off as nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's long history. But somehow, somewhere, humanity had changed. Varkan's mind kept returning to one haunting possibility. Had they always been capable of this, or had they been hiding something all along? He called for a meeting with his senior officers, but as he waited, the images of the battle played over and over in his mind. The humans were not only stronger than they had ever been before, but their strategy was like nothing he had ever encountered. Their ships moved in perfect unison, each one supporting the other in a deadly rhythm. They fought as if they had done it 1,000 times, as if their entire species had been born for this very moment. Varkan couldn't understand it. It wasn't just the technology. It was their unwavering determination, their sense of purpose. The Empire had been built on the backs of countless civilizations they had subjugated, worlds they had consumed, and peoples they had destroyed. To them, it had always been a simple equation: conquer and expand. But humanity, they were different. The humans had never been conquerors. They had always been survivors. And that was what terrified Varkan the most. When the meeting began, the senior officers appeared pale, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. They all knew the truth now. The Empire was losing. The fleet was faltering, and there was no easy way out. "Admiral," one officer began hesitantly, "we need to rethink our strategy. The fleet is being overwhelmed. We can't keep throwing ships into the fight." "The human ships?" "I know," Varkan interrupted, his voice tight with frustration. "I've seen the reports. Their weapons, their tactics, nothing we have is enough to stop them." He paused, struggling to keep his composure. "But we cannot surrender. Not to these humans." Another officer, A young strategist named Koss stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral, if we don't find a way to stop them, we won't just lose the battle. We'll lose everything. The Empire, the galaxy, our very way of life." His eyes locked with Varkin's, desperation burning behind them. "We must know what they've been hiding. Where did they get this power?" Varkin's gaze shifted, his mind racing. There had been whispers among the higher-ups in the Empire, stories of a secret, a hidden history. Some said humanity had always been far more advanced than anyone realized. Others claimed they had uncovered lost technology, or that they had forged alliances with other species long thought extinct. But no one knew for sure. In that moment, something clicked in Varkin's mind. The Empire had never truly known Earth. They had ignored it for centuries, assuming the humans would never rise to challenge them. But what if humanity had always been a sleeping giant, waiting for the right moment? What if the humans had been playing a long game, waiting for their chance to strike back? Varkin turned abruptly, leaving the meeting room without a word. His mind was fixed on a single thought. The Empire had underestimated them. In the darkened corridors of the flagship, Varkin made his way to the Imperial archives, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He had never given Earth's history much thought. It had always seemed irrelevant. But now, the truth seemed urgent, as if the past held the key to understanding this war. He ordered the archives to be opened, his heart pounding as he sifted through centuries of forgotten reports. What he found shocked him. Earth's records were not just a story of primitive humans struggling for survival. They were a chronicle of resilience. The humans had been brought to the brink of extinction by their own wars, yet they had always found a way to survive. They had faced starvation, disease, and environmental collapse, but they had never given up. And most terrifying of all, they had mastered the art of adaptation. As Varkin read on, he found evidence of secret human research that spanned centuries, research into propulsion systems, energy sources, weapons technology. Humanity had long since surpassed their supposed limitations, creating technologies that were light years ahead of anything the Empire had developed. Yet they had kept it hidden, guarded in the shadows, unknown to the rest of the galaxy. The Empire had never known what humanity was truly capable of. Varkin's mind raced. This wasn't just a battle for dominance. This was revenge. The humans had remembered everything. They had never forgotten the Empire's arrogance, the way it had dismissed them as weak and insignificant. Now they had returned with a single purpose, to erase that arrogance. The Empire had taken Earth for granted, had burned it to the ground long ago, with no regard for the future. And now humanity was showing them the cost of that mistake. Varkin felt a cold chill settle in his bones. He had always prided himself on his ability to read the battlefield, to anticipate his enemy's next move. But this was different. The humans were not fighting for glory or territory. They were fighting for justice. In the final moments of his reading, Varkin came across something even more chilling. A series of encrypted messages sent from Earth's last remaining colonies. They were not pleas for peace, not calls for mercy. They were coordinates that led directly to the Empire's most vulnerable systems. Humanity wasn't just here to defeat them. They were here to destroy them, root and stem. The Empire, for all its power, was a relic of the past, and humanity had come to claim the future. Varkin felt his stomach twist with the realization. The Empire had not simply been attacked by a more powerful enemy. It had been exposed for what it truly was, a dying empire that had been too blind to see its end coming. He turned and left the archives, the weight of the truth settling heavily upon him. As he walked back to the command room, he knew that the war was no longer a matter of winning or losing. It was a matter of survival. And the price of survival might just be the end of everything they had ever known. The battle had escalated beyond anything Admiral Varkin had ever imagined. The Empire's massive warships, once invincible symbols of imperial might, now seemed helpless in the face of humanity's fleet. Varkin had watched, helplessly, as one Imperial cruiser after another was torn apart, their shields failing to hold against the devastating precision of the human weapons. The commanders of the remaining Imperial ships had tried to regroup, hoping to form a defensive perimeter, but every tactic they employed only seemed to play into the hands of their merciless enemy. The humans were everywhere, attacking from every angle, their ships appearing like phantoms, slipping through the chaos of battle with terrifying efficiency. The Empire's once unshakable confidence was now replaced by a creeping sense of dread. It was no longer just a matter of strategy. It was a matter of survival. Varkin's mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was no escape. The humans were not only superior in technology, they were relentless, driven by something more than mere conquest. Every ship they destroyed, every life they took, seemed to fuel their fury, and Varkin could feel it. Something personal, something deeply rooted in their history, driving them forward with a cold, unforgiving purpose. Varkin was no fool. He understood the nature of revenge, and it had never been more clear than it was now. Humanity's anger was palpable, their desire for retribution undeniable. The Empire had underestimated them, but worse than that, it had humiliated them, crushed their spirit without ever knowing the cost. The humans had not simply come to take what was theirs. They had come to settle a debt that had been owed for centuries, and the Empire was paying the price. In the command room, Varkin stood silently, watching the holographic displays of the battle unfolding. The enemy's fleet had grown in number, their ships now pressing closer to the heart of Imperial space. Varkin had ordered the mobilization of every available fleet, but it wasn't enough. Each new wave of reinforcement was met with brutal efficiency, their ships falling one by one, as if the humans knew exactly how to counter every tactic, every maneuver. The comms officer spoke up, his voice strained. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the 7th and 9th fleets. They've been wiped out. Our forces are being decimated." Varkin's grip tightened on the edge of the command table, his jaw clenched in frustration. "How many ships remain?" "Only a handful, Admiral. Our forces are scattered and disorganized. We're unable to maintain a coordinated defense." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. The Empire's defenses were unraveling, and there was no force left to stop the humans from advancing. The once proud fleets that had swept across the stars, conquering and annihilating entire civilizations, were now fleeing for their lives. Varkin's mind raced as he realized the magnitude of their defeat. This wasn't just a military engagement, it was the end of an era. The Empire's reign was crumbling, and there was nothing left to stop the inevitable. But Varkin would not surrender. He couldn't, not when the Empire's pride, its very identity, was at stake. "Send a message to the Emperor," he ordered, his voice sharp. "Tell him we need reinforcements, everything we have. We must hold the line, no matter the cost." The comms officer hesitated before nodding and sending the message. But deep down, Varkin knew the truth. The Empire was already lost. The reinforcements would not come in time, and even if they did, they would only serve to prolong the inevitable. The human fleet was too powerful, too precise, and there was one truth that Varkin could no longer deny. Humanity had outgrown the Empire. This war was not about conquest. It was about something far deeper, far more personal than Varkin had initially understood. The tension in the room was palpable as Varkin stood there, his mind still working furiously, searching for a way to turn the tide. But then, as if to answer his thoughts, a new transmission crackled over the comms. The voice that emerged was calm, composed, but its message was like a blade. "Admiral Varkin," the human voice began, "I think you've had enough time to see the futility of this conflict. We've already destroyed your most advanced fleets, crippled your defenses, and cut through your forces like they were nothing. The time for resistance is over." Varkin's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the voice. It was Admiral Kane, the one who had sent the chilling message at the start of the battle. The same voice that had promised the Empire's end. And now, it seemed, That promise was becoming reality. "You fought valiantly," Kane continued, his tone oddly respectful. "But this war is over. Your forces are shattered. And the galaxy is changing. You can either surrender now and spare what's left of your people, or you can watch the last remnants of your empire burn." Varkin's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the command table, his mind spiraling. This wasn't just a battle of military strength. It was a battle of ideals. The humans weren't interested in occupying worlds or expanding their reach. They wanted justice. They wanted the Empire to answer for the countless atrocities it had committed. And Varkin, for the first time in his life, understood the gravity of that desire. The Empire had been built on the backs of the oppressed, the weak, and the powerless. The human fleet had come to end that cycle once and for all. The room was silent for a long moment. No one dared speak, and Varkin found himself staring at the communication screen, his mind numb with the enormity of the choice before him. There was no victory left to be had, no strategy to turn the tide. The Empire's legacy, built on centuries of oppression, was crumbling in the face of humanity's unyielding drive for justice. "Admiral," the comms officer's voice broke through the silence. "The Emperor insists on a final counterattack. He's giving the order to deploy the extermination protocol." Varkin felt a chill run down his spine. The extermination protocol was the Empire's last resort, an ancient weapon capable of destroying entire planets in an instant. It was their ultimate deterrent, a weapon of unimaginable power, hidden deep within their arsenal for emergencies such as this. The Emperor believed that if he could wipe out humanity's homeworld, Earth, he could force them into submission. Varkin knew what this meant. He had seen the protocol deployed once before, during a rebellion, and the devastation it caused was absolute. The weapon had the power to end the human resistance in an instant. But something in Varkin's gut told him that if the Empire deployed it, there would be no coming back from it. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for everything they had lost. And if the Empire killed Earth, humanity would make sure the Empire never existed again. He hesitated, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The weapon was ready, but so was humanity. And in that moment, Varkin realized something that terrified him more than any weapon ever could. The humans were prepared to fight to the very end. The decision to deploy the extermination protocol loomed over Admiral Varkin like a shadow. The weapon was an unparalleled force of destruction, a doomsday device capable of annihilating entire planets in mere moments. The Empire had created it long ago, knowing that there would come a time when its reach would falter, and they would need to assert their dominance with the most brutal means available. Varkin had always known of its existence, but it had been relegated to the annals of imperial history, a forgotten relic. Now, it was the only card left to play. But as he stood there, with the weight of the command heavy upon his shoulders, he could not shake the thought that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The rules had shifted. His fleet, once the epitome of power and control, was scattered and broken, its ships reduced to debris by humanity's relentless assault. And the humans weren't finished yet. Their ships, sleek and deadly, moved with precision, striking with the cold, calculated fury of a species that had faced extinction and emerged stronger for it. It was impossible to deny the truth now. Humanity had evolved into something beyond the Empire's understanding. Varkin paced the command room, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. The Emperor's orders were clear: use the extermination protocol to wipe out Earth, to erase the very planet that had dared to stand up to the Empire's might. It would be the final blow, the end of humanity's resistance. And yet, as Varkin stared at the flickering holographic map of the galaxy, a part of him rebelled against the order. What would be left after Earth was destroyed? Would the Empire truly win, or would they simply ignite a firestorm that would consume them all? The door to the command room slid open, and Varkin's second-in-command, Captain Rylus, entered. Her face was grim, and her eyes held the same haunted look that had begun to fill the faces of all the officers under his command. The fight was lost, and they all knew it. But there was still the question of whether the final act would be one of absolute devastation or one of survival. "Admiral," Rylus said, her voice calm but strained, "the fleet has received the order to launch the extermination protocol. It's ready to fire. The coordinates are locked in." Varkan looked at her, his jaw clenched. He knew what she was asking, what they were all asking. "Are we sure about this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Rylus's silence was answer enough. She didn't need to speak, for the fear and uncertainty in her eyes said everything that needed to be said. They had all signed up to serve the Empire, to fight for its glory and its future. But now they were being asked to destroy a world, a people who had not only resisted them, but had proven themselves more than capable of defending their home. How could they pull the trigger on a weapon that would wipe out every trace of life on Earth? Varkan turned away, his gaze drawn to the stars beyond the ship's viewports. The light of distant suns flickered, indifferent to the lives of those caught in this conflict. It was a beautiful, cold expanse, vast and silent. The universe had always been a place of conquest, of expansion, of domination. But humanity had changed the game. They had found a way to survive, to rise from nothing to become a force that even the Empire could not easily defeat. The thought hit him with a jolt. Was this the future? Was this the change the galaxy needed? He thought of the stories he had heard, the rumors of human perseverance, their ability to endure despite the overwhelming odds. He remembered the ancient records of Earth's history, wars, famine, plagues, and how, through it all, the humans had not only survived but rebuilt, again and again. They had no empire to call their own, no ruling class, no ancient bloodlines to rely upon. They had only each other, and in that, they had found strength. Perhaps that was the greatest threat to the Empire, humanity's ability to adapt, to evolve, to come together in the face of adversity. They didn't need an empire. They didn't need to conquer the galaxy. They just needed to survive. Varkan's thoughts were interrupted as the communications officer's voice crackled through the speakers. "Admiral, we've received another transmission from the human fleet. They're sending a final message." Varkan's heart skipped. He had no idea what this message would hold, but he could already feel the cold grip of inevitability tightening around him. He nodded sharply. "Put it through." The transmission appeared on the main screen. For a moment, there was only static, the image flickering and distorting as the communication attempted to stabilize. Then it cleared, and Admiral Kane's calm face appeared, the same unshakable resolve in his eyes. His voice was steady, but there was something else in it, a deep sorrow, as though he knew what was coming and had made peace with it. "Admiral Varkan," Kane said, his tone even, "I know this war has been difficult for you, for your people. I know the Empire has taken everything from us. But it is time to end it." Varkan's throat tightened, and his hands clenched into fists. He had never expected to hear words like this from a human, not after everything that had been done. "You can't end it like this," he whispered, though he knew it was a futile plea. "We were the Empire. We were the power." Kane's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "You were," he said. "But the galaxy is changing, Admiral. Power, real power, comes not from force or domination, but from the will to survive. And you've already lost that. The Empire lost it long ago. You've forgotten what it means to protect, to care for those you rule over." He paused, his voice hardening. "And for that, you must fall." Varkan felt the weight of the words sink deep into his chest. He could no longer deny the truth. Humanity was not simply fighting for their survival. They were fighting for something greater. They were fighting for the future, for a galaxy that had not been shaped by tyranny or oppression, but by the will of those who refused to be dominated. Kane continued, his voice now low but unyielding. "You know what you must do. The extermination protocol is not the answer. It never was. If you destroy Earth, you will destroy yourself, The Empire will die, not in glory, but in shame. It's over, Varkin. The humans have already won. The transmission ended, and silence filled the room. Varkin stood frozen for a long time, his mind racing. He thought of the Emperor's orders, of the weapon ready to destroy Earth, of the immense power of the Empire. But more than that, he thought of the message Kane had left him. It wasn't just a challenge. It was an invitation to consider what the Empire had become, and whether it could truly survive the collapse of its own arrogance. He turned to his officers, the faces that had once looked to him for leadership now etched with fear and uncertainty. They were waiting for his orders, but now he didn't know what to say. For the first time, he didn't know if he could give the order to fire. The silence in the command room had become unbearable, a void that swallowed all words, all decisions. Admiral Varkin stood at the center, torn between his duty to the Empire and the unsettling realization that everything he had once believed about strength and power was slipping through his fingers. The room felt suffocating, the weight of his indecision pressing on him like an iron mantle. The extermination protocol still stood ready. Its destructive power was locked in, and every second he delayed was another second that humanity's fleet used to tighten the noose around the Empire's throat. He turned away from the officers' expectant eyes, unable to meet their gaze any longer. He couldn't lead them down this path, not when the cost was so clear. The weapon, the extermination protocol, was a hammer, but it was a hammer aimed at everything he had ever known. Humanity had shown him what true strength was, what true power meant, and it wasn't in the destruction of a planet, no matter how much the Empire might want to erase the stain of its humiliation. It was in the resilience to rebuild, to endure, to live, even when the odds were impossible. Admiral. Rylas's voice broke through the haze of his thoughts. The Emperor is demanding a final report. We need your orders. Varkin had known this moment was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to face. He could feel the Emperor's gaze on him, a cold, judgmental stare from across the stars, ready to pass sentence. To refuse would mean treason. It would mean the end of his career, the end of his legacy. It could mean the end of the Empire itself. And yet, as the seconds ticked by, Varkin felt an irrepressible urge to rebel, to take a step that would defy the very foundations of everything he had fought for. "You're not the same," he muttered, more to himself than to Rylas. His thoughts drifted to the humans, their strength, their spirit, the way they had fought back with nothing but the sheer will to survive, the way they had faced annihilation time and time again, only to rise from the ashes stronger than ever. The human capacity for endurance had shaken him to his core, making him question everything he had ever believed. Rylas hesitated before speaking again, her voice softer this time. "Admiral, I know the pressure you're under. We all do. But we can still win this. We can still crush them. The extermination protocol will be our victory." Varkin looked at her, seeing the hope in her eyes, the hope that he had once shared, that they could still bend the galaxy to their will. But now, that hope felt hollow, a ghost of the past. He had seen enough to know the truth. The Empire wasn't a force for progress or peace. It was a machine of oppression, built on the backs of weaker civilizations, all of them crushed under its boot. The humans weren't the problem. The problem was the Empire itself. It had become a prison for the galaxy, a system that valued power over compassion, control over freedom. And that system was now collapsing, brought down by the very people it had long sought to destroy. He straightened up, his fingers drumming against the cold metal of the command table. "Tell the Emperor," he began, his voice hardening. "Tell him that I will not give the order to fire." Rylas blinked, disbelief flashing across her face. "Admiral, what are you saying?" Varkin turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that she had never seen before. "I'm saying that the Empire is finished. We're not going to fight them anymore. We're not going to destroy Earth. If we do that, we will lose everything. The humans have won, Rylas. They've beaten us. And if we continue this war, we will be nothing more than the final example of everything that's wrong with the galaxy." Her mouth opened, but she seemed at a loss for words, unable to comprehend what he was saying. The others in the room exchanged uncertain glances, their tension palpable. There was no room for uncertainty in the Empire. There had never been a question that its will would be absolute. And now, Varkan was defying that very principle. In the silence that followed, Varkan could feel his own heart pounding. Was this the right choice? Would they all be branded as traitors, or would they simply be free? Free from the shackles of a dying system. "Admiral," Rylus said, her voice trembling now, "if you refuse the Emperor's orders, there will be consequences. We will all be condemned for this." Varkan looked out at the stars, the lights of distant systems twinkling like distant memories. The Empire had spread across the galaxy like a disease, consuming everything in its path, leaving behind a wake of destruction. But humanity had never sought to dominate. They had only sought to live. And in their refusal to surrender, in their insistence on survival, they had created something far more dangerous than any weapon the Empire had ever built. "I know," he said, his voice hollow. "But what are we really saving by continuing this fight? More bloodshed? More lives destroyed? Or do we let this war end and let the galaxy heal?" Rylus took a step back, her eyes wide with shock. The truth of his words seemed to settle in the room like a heavy fog, spreading from one officer to the next. One by one, their expressions shifted from disbelief to something else. Uncertainty, confusion, fear. Varkan had done the unthinkable. He had betrayed the very foundation of the Empire. He could almost feel the Emperor's fury building across the stars, a distant storm of wrath that would not be ignored. But the Emperor wasn't here. The decision was his to make, and he would not let it fall to someone who had never seen the cost of this war, someone who had never witnessed the damage it had done to the very fabric of the galaxy. "The humans are not the enemy anymore," Varkan said quietly, almost to himself. "We are." The room remained silent, the officers too stunned to respond. Varkan knew there was no turning back now. He had made his choice. But as he looked at the faces around him, he wondered if he was truly alone in this decision. Would they stand with him, or would they follow the Empire's iron grip to its bitter, inevitable end? "I've already sent the order," Varkan said, his voice resolute. "We will stand down. We will cease all hostilities. We'll offer Earth peace, and we will pull back our forces. The Empire is no more. Its time has passed." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, one by one, the officers began to nod, as if realizing, deep down, that the Admiral was right. They had fought for a dying empire. They had been pawns in a game that no longer mattered. Varkan took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the stars outside the viewport. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was making the right choice. The galaxy could heal. Humanity had shown him that. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for the Empire to fade away, and for something new to take its place. The final transmission from the Empire had been brief, cut off almost as soon as it had started. Varkan's actions had sent shockwaves through the fleet, and the silence that followed was more deafening than any battle ever could have been. No one spoke, no one moved, as though they were all waiting for the consequences of his decision to come crashing down upon them. Admiral Varkan stood at the center of the command room, watching the stars outside the viewports as though they held the answers to every question in his mind. The fleet was in disarray, and the message to Earth, humanity's last hope, had already been sent. It was a message of peace, of surrender, but more importantly, it was a message of change. The Empire was finished, and the future had to be rebuilt, piece by piece. The weight of the moment was suffocating, and yet there was an undeniable sense of relief in Varkan's chest. He had done the right thing, the thing that no one else in the Empire would have dared to do. But as the truth of it began to sink in, the reality became clear. It wasn't just the Empire that needed to change. It was the entire galaxy. The cycle of war, of domination, of destruction. Those patterns had to be broken. The human fleet was still out there, but this time, it wasn't as an enemy. They had already made their decision to stop fighting, to make peace. And the moment that decision was made, everything else seemed to fall into place. It wasn't about victory anymore, not in the way the Empire had always defined it. Victory didn't mean crushing your opponent beneath your heel. Victory, now, meant surviving, rebuilding, and coming together to forge a new future. Varkin's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden hum of the communications array. The officer who had been monitoring the transmission channels stood up, eyes wide with disbelief. "Admiral, it's Earth. They've responded." Varkin's pulse quickened. His breath caught in his throat. This was it, the moment of truth, the message that would determine the fate of everything. He stepped forward, his heart racing as the display flickered to life, revealing a transmission from Earth's High Command. It was Admiral Kane again. His face, as calm as ever, appeared on the screen. The human had once been his adversary, the very embodiment of the enemy the Empire had sworn to crush. Now Kane's face seemed to represent something different, something Varkin had come to recognize as the very spirit of humanity: hope. "Admiral Varkin," Kane began, his voice steady, but there was something in it now, something that seemed to echo across the stars. "Your message has been received. You have made the right decision. The war ends today." Varkin's throat tightened, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. The words, the ones he had hoped to hear, but never believed he would, hung in the air between them. The war was over. And for the first time, Varkin allowed himself to believe it. "We will hold our fire," Kane continued. "We will not engage, and we will stand by while the Empire comes to terms with the consequences of its actions. You've chosen a different path, Admiral, a path that leads to something better. You've chosen peace, and we will walk that path with you." A wave of emotion surged through Varkin: relief, pride, and something else that he couldn't quite name. He had given up the power, the glory, the certainty of an empire that was dying from the inside out. And in return, he had helped to secure something far greater: a chance for something new, a chance for a future. The room was still as the reality of what had just happened began to settle. The war was over, and the humans, despite all the odds, had won. Not through force, not through fear, but through something that the Empire had never understood: perseverance, compassion, and the will to live. They had refused to be crushed, and in doing so, they had turned the tide. Varkin turned to face his officers, who were still standing in stunned silence. They had been his loyal crew, his comrades in arms, and yet, in the last moments of the Empire's reign, they had all witnessed a truth they had never been prepared for. It wasn't just the Empire that had fallen. It was the entire system that had governed their lives for as long as they could remember. And now, it was time to rebuild. The communications officer spoke again, breaking the silence. "Admiral, Earth's command is requesting that we initiate a ceasefire and begin the process of demobilizing our fleet. They have agreed to send representatives to negotiate terms of peace." Varkin nodded, his mind already working through the steps of what would come next. There would be no more fighting, no more destruction. What was left of the Empire would disband, its leadership scattered to the winds. But the galaxy itself would survive. Humanity's victory wasn't just a victory for Earth. It was a victory for the future of every civilization that had been crushed under the Empire's boot. And the future was theirs to shape. "Prepare to transmit our full surrender," Varkin ordered, his voice firm. "We will work with the humans, and we will end this once and for all." The officers moved swiftly, their faces now reflecting the same resolve that Varkin had seen in Kane. They understood. It wasn't about the past anymore. It wasn't about the Empire's power or the destruction of their enemies. It was about creating a future where people could live freely, where survival didn't mean submission, and where strength came from unity rather than fear. The fleet began to power down, one ship after another, their weapons deactivated, their engines slowed. A few still lingered in orbit, their hulls marked with the scars of battle, but they no longer had purpose. The war was over. As Varkin stood there, watching the stars once more, he realized that the galaxy, in all its chaos and uncertainty, was at the beginning of something new. And in this new era, humanity would not just survive. They would thrive. They would rebuild a galaxy that was fractured, a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to be united. Varkin knew, in that moment, that peace had not come through the destruction of the Empire, nor had it come through the victory of one side over the other. Peace had come because humanity had never given up on it, and that was something that no empire, no matter how vast, could ever take away. The transmission from Earth ended, and the fleet drifted, a final symbol of the Empire's collapse and humanity's rise. The future was theirs to shape now, and as Varkin looked out at the stars, he knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but it would also be filled with hope.